Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money color commentator. On today's show, choosing your chapter of bankruptcy, part one in our series on the myths and material facts of bankruptcy with attorney Mallory Powers. Welcome to the segment, Mallory.
Thank you.
Mallory, we had you on some months ago to do a segment, and we thought you did such a good job. I want to bring you back on and talk about it in its fullness. Now, usually I like to start talking about bankruptcy somewhere around January after everybody's done their holiday shopping, and we're really up against it. We got credit card debt, we have car lease and payment debt, we got major equity debt with our mortgage on top of it, and then don't even count the $1.1 trillion in student loans now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now I remember last time you kind of gave me some scary stuff, but you said some of this stuff is dischargeable, some of it is not. So that's kind of scary. We'll get into that all this week. Now, let's just talk about it. First of all, why did you could have been an attorney in any field you wanted, why'd you choose bankruptcy?
I kind of fell into bankruptcy. I went and worked for an attorney that I previously worked for, and he picked up bankruptcy right in 2009, 2010, when there was a really big need for it. And so I really enjoyed helping people figure out the debt or financial situations that they got into. So I enjoyed trying to help people.
Does everybody that you sit and counsel with, do they ultimately always choose some chapter of bankruptcy?
Not always. Sometimes it's not worth it. There might be other options. They might be able to negotiate with their creditors. So there's different things that people can do besides bankruptcy. It is important, if you are going to choose bankruptcy, that you choose the correct chapter.
All right, let's say, and we're going to get into that. We're going to choose the right chapter. So many people, is this a death sentence? I mean, I'm filing Chapter 7. Is my life over as I know it?
No, it's not. There's life after bankruptcy.
Okay.
Many people come out of bankruptcy feeling like they truly received their fresh start and can start over and learn some lessons maybe, or just waiting for the next big event that got them there in the first place.
Well, let's talk about it. When you're looking at the difference between Chapter 7, 11, 13, we'll talk about some of these things here. I'm looking at, when you say qualifying, you said some people can work this out, they can make payments. Who are you looking for? No, they really need to file. This is too much of a hassle.
Someone that just has overwhelming credit card debt, medical debt, job loss. Maybe they got divorced and now they only have one income instead of two. Those are people who are usually looking to file a bankruptcy. Sometimes to qualify, you have to have a certain amount of income to get into a Chapter 7. And if you're over that amount of income, then you have to look at a Chapter 13. So that's where you have to qualify.
For the normal person that really qualifies for 7, do you have any ratio of like, here's your debt versus your income, and yes, that is overwhelming, you crossed a threshold, an economic line in the sand, so to speak?
Not really. It just depends, because as long as your income is under the median income for your state and your household size, that's all that really matters for qualification. You can have, $1,000 of debt or $50,000 of debt or way more. You never know. So it really doesn't, it's not a debt to income ratio. It's just qualifying for the income portion and having any disposable income versus if you can pay any back.
Now, I know that the last time you were in here, I had a couple emails that said, hey, Steve, if I file Chapter 7, I can never file it again. True or not true?
Not true.
Not true.
So there are time periods for when you can file another Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. And that changed in 2005 with the code changes. So you have to have not received a discharge in another filed Chapter 7 case within 8 years to file another one. We always look back 8 years. We say, have you ever filed a bankruptcy in the last 8 years?
Any bankruptcy or 7 specific?
We ask any bankruptcy, and that gives us an idea. But in a Chapter 13, it's a little bit different. And so if you're filing a Chapter 7, or if you're looking to file a Chapter 7, we want to make sure you haven't filed a Chapter 13 in the last 6 years or a Chapter 7 in the last 8 years.
But you could, I guess technically every 8 years clear the deck, I guess.
Right. And there are people that do that. There are people who do that.
They just live for tomorrow and,
Yeah, and sometimes you can't help it. There are things that happen.
Sure.
But I've had clients who have filed 3 bankruptcies already. And usually they're a little bit older because that's already your 24 years there.
Wow. Well, let me ask you, does it matter what kind of debt you have? Because, I'm looking at some of these lists. I have medical bills, credit card debt. I got judgments, even business debt. Does it matter?
It doesn't matter what type of debt you have. You can file bankruptcy with any kind of debt. It just matters what chapter you're going to look at. So if you have a lot of tax debt or if you have a lot of domestic support obligations, those are considered priority debts, and you're probably going to look for a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. If you have credit cards, medical bills, things like that, those are going to be unsecured debts most likely, and you're going to look at a Chapter 7 bankruptcy.
Okay, so let's say I am going 7 because the top of your list here is unsecured debt, and that means all that can get wiped out.
In most cases, yes.
Oh, no, what do you mean by most cases?
Well, there can be some little things here and there that might be non-dischargeable. You know, a student loan, for example, is unsecured debt, but that's not going to be not going to be dischargeable in all cases. It can be in some. Okay,
now stop for a second. I've always was under the impression that student loan was never dischargeable. There could be some scenarios where it would be.
Yeah, there can be.
Wow.
And it's hard to do, hard to prove, but it can be in certain respects.
What about alimony? I mean, that's usually not dischargeable.
Right, that's not dischargeable. But again, there are ways where that can, where bankruptcy can help you with that. If you fall really far behind, maybe you lost your job and this spousal support is just ongoing and accruing, you can file a bankruptcy, a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, to just get caught up on that. So you're not discharging it, but you can get caught up on it.
So maybe they'll let you reorganize it.
Right.
Okay. What about I'm assuming paying child support is non-dischargeable.
Right, non-dischargeable.
Okay. So there's certain things that you need to keep in mind. What about, I see these commercials on television. You owe the IRS 50 grand.
Yeah.
Dischargeable?
It depends. So tax debt is another one where there's a rule that applies. So it depends how old your debt is, whether you filed your tax returns, and as long as you fall into a certain rule, then maybe some of it will be dischargeable, maybe not. So you have to have someone take a look at it and make sure that it would fall into this category where it could be dischargeable or not.
Let me shift gears, put it in the clutch. What about Chapter 13 now? There's some debt limit numbers here. Give me a little couple of numbers to kind of guide me.
Right. So you have to, again, qualify for a Chapter 13 in the respect where you have to be under these debt limits that are set. You have to have less than $1,184,200 in secured debt.
Who comes up with these numbers?
I really don't know. Okay. And you have to have less than $394,725 in unsecured debt. So if you have a mortgage, maybe you have a $2 million mortgage, and it's, that's how much you currently owe, you're not going to qualify for this Chapter 13 bankruptcy. You might have to look at a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and if you want to keep your home, maybe just continue paying it. But unsecured debt.
Did I just hear you say you could actually cherry pick some of this and pull your mortgage out of the 7 bankruptcy?
Yeah, you can. Okay. It still counts as far as the debt limits and the amount of debt that you have. But if you want to keep your home, you just have to continue paying on the mortgage.
Now, I noticed in some of the briefs that you've given me that Chapter 7, you cannot have filed Chapter 7 going into Chapter 13 now, right? Because you're within that 8-year period. Is that correct? Did I read that right?
You can have filed a Chapter 7, but it has to be within a time period. So you can't have filed a Chapter 7 within the 4 years prior to the Chapter 13, and you can't file a Chapter 13 within 2 years before filing another Chapter 13. So it's 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, and 8 years when you're looking at when to file a 7 or a 13, and if you filed a previous 7 or 13.
Do you have consumers that game the system?
We do. We do.
Wow.
And some people don't even necessarily know it, but when they come in to see me and I look through all their details and make sure that they haven't filed another one before, and I say, well, you don't qualify for a 7, but you do for a 13, that might be an option. Sometimes you can actually file that 13 instead of a 7, dismiss it, and then file a 7 when you're actually eligible. So there are ways to kind of work around it, and it's not bad to do it. It's not considered bad faith. It's a way of managing your debt.
And the creditors can do nothing about it once it goes to the filing. Once it's approved and it's an obligation that can be dismissed, it's dismissed.
Discharged. Yeah, it's a allowable debt that can be discharged. There's not much a creditor can do. So they can file their proof of claim in a bankruptcy, alleging how much is owed. And if it's a secured creditor, they can attach any security agreement to it. But once that happens, there's not much they can do. If it becomes an asset case where there are funds to be had for creditors, then the creditors can get paid through the bankruptcy. That can happen in a Chapter 7 or 13. So they can get paid in some respects, but if not, then they're out of luck and they just have to write off that debt.
Well, don't forget to watch our next segment on personal property losses, part 2 in our series on the myths and material facts of bankruptcy. And keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always check with your tax consultant, legal counsel, and your financial advisor. You've been watching Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game.